Hi, welcome to The Musical Drummer, the channel where we help you sound like you and nobody else. This episode we're going to be talking about space and time and how that applies to your drumming and how understanding space and time in terms of drumming will help you become a more musical drummer. I hope you'll join me. My name's Mark. I'm so glad you're here. Come on in. Okay, so space and time. Before we get to that, I want to first do a little recap from the first video. If you haven't watched that yet, I recommend that you do because that kind of lays the groundwork for this whole series of videos. But for now, let me just give you a brief recap of what that talked about. And the basic idea is that perfect drumming is boring drumming, and imperfect drumming is interesting drumming. And I made two little charts to help you. Here's the idea. This is perfection, this line here, total perfection, perfectly straight, no variation, goes from point A to point B in the shortest possible route. Perfect. This one over here, this is imperfection. And now you know what the two things are because you see them together, right? This one, let me put the glasses away, I don't need them. I'm old, what can I say? This one shows you, if you have electrodes hooked up to you in a hospital and the oscilloscope shows you this line, it means you're dead. If it shows you this line, it means you're alive. And that's the nature of music and imperfection. Perfect drumming, where everything is perfectly even and perfectly ordered and just like a machine, is totally boring, totally empty, totally devoid of life and personality and expression, which is what music is all about. So so that's the idea. Perfection is what we don't want. And of course, the thing is, all your training, all the instruction and work we do, that we all do, that I do, right? We want to get those double strokes perfectly even. We want to get our single strokes totally clean. We want to make sure our ghost notes are exactly the right volume in relation to the main note. We want to make sure that all of our rudiments are executed with just mathematical precision, right? We work hard to get all of those things. But doing that makes us, that perfection that we strive for is our enemy. You want to have perfection in technique so that you can execute the things that your heart tells you to execute. But it's your heart. There's no music in your head, it's only in your heart. And as I said in the first video, we don't play drums with our hands and our feet, we play drums with our ears and our heart. And that is the goal and the essence of all the videos we're going to do here. So, and the first video went into a lot of detail about what that means, what music is, how we think about playing, all that sort of thing. What it didn't go into in great detail, and what this video is going to do, is talk about what I mean by imperfection. Because you might think, when you hear that, you might think, oh, well, that means if playing perfectly is not the goal, then I can be as sloppy as I want. You might think, oh, I don't need to learn all that technique and all of that rudiments and technical stuff, stick control, all that jazz. I don't need to learn that because that just leads to perfection. So I'm going to stop taking lessons. I'm going to play sloppy. You might think that imperfection means that your time can waver all over the place. So let me address those things because I think that is where the idea could go sideways a little bit. So let's take them down the line. First, playing sloppy. I do not mean that you can play sloppily because imperfection is important. No, not at all. In fact, it's quite the opposite. The goal, the place you want to be when you're drumming is you want every single note to be totally expressive, totally authentic. And achieving that means you have to be completely in the zone 100% of the time. I don't think any of us actually ever achieve 100%, but that's the goal. But being in the zone is the opposite of not caring what you play. It's the opposite. It means every note is meaningful. Every note is essential. That's the opposite of sloppy. Now, technique. As I said, you might think imperfection means you don't need to take all those lessons. They're just in the way. And in a sense, you're right, in a sense. Drummers who, the first major rock drummers, John Bonham, Ringo, all those guys, they didn't take lessons for the most part. They were self-taught, which is one reason why their playing is so expressive, so individualistic, so distinctive for each drummer. Blues drummers never, any of the classic blues drummers, never ever took a lesson, except maybe from another blues drummer. And that's why that music is so deeply expressive and meaningful and soulful. Jazz drummers, especially the early jazz drummers, they never took a lesson except maybe from another jazz player. Being self-taught pretty much guarantees that you're going to be very expressive and very individual in your playing. But it also means that you're limited in what you can do because you only have the technique you figured out for yourself. Taking lessons, whether that's with a drummer in person or online or from a book, any of those things, doing that makes your life easier. Not in the moment. It's hard, very hard to learn all this. I've been working on some rudimental stuff that doesn't come naturally to me lately, and I'm realizing how hard I have to work to get it to be more natural. But that's the idea, is that you learning all that stuff, all that technical stuff, stick control, just how to hold a stick to your hand, everything, all the technical parts of drumming. If you learn those, it means that when you get to that point where you want to play expressively, you have the tools to do it. Whatever your heart tells you, you should play. Whatever the music, remember we play with our heart and our ears, not our hands and our feet. Whatever your heart, whatever your ear hears other people playing, and whatever your heart tells you to play in response to it, you'll be able to play that without even thinking, because your hands and feet are trained and they know how to do it. They can execute anything you feel. So taking the lessons, putting in the years of hours and hours a day for years to learn how to really do that stuff is going to make your life easier in the long run. In the moment, you may not like it. It's hard work. But in the long run, it means you can be a drummer who can play with more expression because you're not limited by what you already know how to do from learning yourself, right? So that's that part. Now, the third thing imperfection might lead you to think is that you might think that if I tell you that imperfection is what we want in drumming, that means that your time can waver. And the answer to that one is what we're going to be talking about today. This is where the space and time idea comes in. And the answer to the question is, does it mean your time can waver, is yes and no. And here's what I mean by that. You want your tempo to be consistent because otherwise people can't dance to it. Other musicians will have trouble. I mean, if you're playing music with a steady tempo, not all music is. There are some kinds of jazz where that's not part of the picture. There's classical music that's not always part of the picture. In fact, rarely part of the picture. So, you know, but if you're playing a type of music where a steady tempo is important, which means any kind of popular music, really, you want your tempo to be steady, right? That's just part of the requirement of the music you're playing. But the tempo is defined by where the downbeat is in each measure of the music you're playing. You want that to come at regular intervals. But all the space in between is where there's not only room to move, but you kind of have to move if you want your playing to be expressive and personal, and if you want to sound like you and nobody else. there's well, first let me do this. Here's an exercise for you to try. Pick a piece of music with your favorite drummer on it, or just a piece of music you like, and play along with it. And what I want you to do is I want you to play every single note that that drummer's playing. So pick something that's easy, a basic piece. Don't pick some really complicated odd time signature and tricky stuff you can't really play. Pick something very simple, just something very simple. And I want you to play so that you're playing, you hit every single note exactly where the drummer on the record hits it, exactly. And it'd be best to do this if you pick a piece of a recording that was done more than 30 years ago, only because recordings since in the last 30 years have mostly been quantized in the post-production, which means that everything is perfectly even in the drumming, and that won't help you with this exercise that we want to do. So pick something older, something simple, play along with it, and make every note of yours hit exactly where every note of the drummer on the record hits. And try and play the whole song that way. And I'm going to bet, I'd bet a whole $5 that you can't do it. I hope you can't do it, because if you can perfectly match what the drummer's doing on the record, it means that you have surrendered completely your own sense of time so that you can copy that guy, right? And that's the opposite of what these videos are aiming to give you. What we want is you to have your sense of time, not his sense of time, not anybody else's sense of time, your sense of time. So that, if you do that exercise, I hope you will find that you can't really match someone else's playing if it's a human being playing and not a computer manipulating the playing. I hope you can't do it, and I hope you see that you can't do it, and that's a good thing, because that is what we're after here. This is the subject of this video, is that those tiny little micro variations in where the stick hits the head. And they're different from one person to the next. They're different from one beat to the next for the same drummer playing 5 notes in a row. You want it so that those 5 notes are slightly different in their placement from each other. You want that because that's what being human is. We are not clocks. We are not machines. Even somebody like Jeff Porcaro, who could play, who could lock into anything, but he's not a machine, and his playing, those notes are slightly different from each other. So that exercise is the purpose of the exercise, and do try it. Learn for yourself that you're not a machine, because that's what we're aiming for here, is you not being a machine. So try that exercise. Prove to yourself you can't really play right with somebody else, and more importantly, you don't want to be able to, okay? So to me, this subject always brings me back to a quote that I read in an article that Robert Fripp from King Crimson, he wrote. He had a regular column in Musician magazine back in the 80s, and it was a wonderful column. You should look those up if you can. But in one of them, he had this quote, and he said, "Music is the cup that holds the wine of silence. Sound is that cup, but empty. Noise is that cup, but broken." And I had to think about that one for a long time to really kind of come to grips with what he was saying. And the thing is, you can hear a train going by on a train track, clickety, clickety, clickety as it goes by. That's sound. But there's no music in that. There's no heart. There's no soul. There's no meaning. There's no purpose. There's no expression. It's just sound. That's the cup, but it's empty. The music that is mechanical like a train is empty. You want music, the cup that is music, to be holding wine. You want it to be full of life and meaning and purpose. So that's what the quote is about. Noise is that cup, but broken, it's not even the regulated sound of a train. It's just random racket that has no expression. And unfortunately, there's music being produced and bought and danced to these days that is more like a train or more like the broken cup. And that's not, well, if you're watching these, if that's what you want, if you want to be perfect as a drummer, you want to be mechanical, I am not telling you you're crazy or you're wrong at all. You should absolutely go for that if that's what you want. And as I said, people make and sell tons of records on that basis. And so, fine. You know, there's no right or wrong here. I'm just telling you what I think, how I feel about this. If you want to develop this more sort of personal expression approach to drumming, then these videos are for you. If you don't, no hard feelings. There are a million other things to watch on YouTube, and you should go watch them. Simple as that. And as I said, I don't feel like you're wrong or you have a bad idea at all. I'm just giving you my perspective as an older drummer. And if you find it useful, then let's keep going. So what I am saying, and what this Robert Fripp quote about the cup being the music being the cup that holds the wine of silence, it's the silence part. That's what threw me when I first heard the quote. He's saying music is the cup and the wine is silence. And that is where the space part of our space and time exploration comes in. The expressive aspect of music, of rhythm in particular, comes from, not from the notes you play, but from the space between them. This reminds me of a quote, not a quote, it was in a book I read years and years, decades ago, about how the mind works. And the author was talking about a computer program. And he said, the information in a string of computer language is not in the ones and zeros. We all think it is. We think that's what computer language is about. The meaning the computer is trying to convey is in the ones and the zeros. That's the only tools the computer has. And he was saying in this book, no, the information is not in the ones and zeros. The information is in the difference between the one and the zero. And it's the same way with music. Music is not the feeling in music, the expressive part of music is not in the notes. Let me say that again. The expressive part of music, the part that moves you, the meaning in music, is not in the notes you play. It's in the space between the notes you play and how long that space is and where that space falls and if that space feels like breathing or not breathing. Let me give you an example. When I was in college, I took a course on medieval church architecture. Don't ask me why. It just looked like it might be interesting. But one of the things that struck me in there was this. If you go into a medieval cathedral, right, you go into the sanctuary part of it, and here's those enormous high ceilings and the pillars and the arched ceiling and the light pouring in through the clerestory windows at the top, down in shafts down into the center of the church. It's magnificent. That's what strikes us, right? It's just, look at these soaring spaces. Look at the majesty of this space. That's what the goal is for the people who are building the cathedral. That's what you want. You want to strike awe into the people who come to the church. So we're looking for soaring spaces and light streaming down that gives that feeling of awe and majesty that represents that religious ideal. So here's another mental experiment this time. I want you to pick an imaginary cathedral. You know what they look like. Just picture one in your head. And see those soaring spaces and the light pouring in and all that stuff. Okay, so that's Hold that in your head. Now, I want you to imagine that same exact space with no church, no cathedral, just grass. And, okay, point to the soaring spaces. Point to the feeling of awe and majesty. It's not there. It's not there. And the thing is, it's not the building that creates awe and majesty. It's the space defined by the building. The building encloses the space and says, this space is soaring. This space is awe-inspiring. This space is majestic. The building simply encloses the space, and the space itself is the thing that has all that feeling. So now you see, and this is what Robert Fripp was talking about. Music is the cup that holds the wine of silence. It's the silence that gives the music its meaning, just like it's the church building that gives the space its majesty and awe. So let's dig into that a bit now. What that means is, and here's something I want to emphasize throughout all these videos, this imperfection idea. It's not something that you can learn. It's not something you can study. It's not something you can teach. As you can probably tell. But the way it works is this. You were born. You, just you, not you were born with your sense of time, of rhythm, of feeling, of expression. Your sense of music was yours when you were born. Nothing can change it. You can't add to it. You can't, you were born with it, and it is what it is. And your sense of time, and again, I'm talking about that space between the notes, where that next note should land, because landing it here is going to, well, if you play, if you've been a drummer for a while, you've probably heard of expression of playing ahead of the beat or behind the beat. And that's just, well, that doesn't mean that your tempo is changing. It just means that if you play the bass drum on the downbeat, your snare drum, if you're playing ahead of the beat, your snare drum is going to lean a little forward toward that downbeat. And if you're playing behind the beat, it's going to lean a little back toward the next beat. And those shifts are the thing that make it, if you're playing ahead of the beat, the music's going to be really, lively. It's going to be exciting. It's going to feel like it wants to go. Stuart Copeland plays way ahead of the beat. And that's one of the reasons why his drumming is so compelling, why the Police were such a compelling band, because he really leans forward with every beat, makes it feel like it wants to go faster and faster. Very exciting. You listen to any of the sort of 70s California rock songs, and the drums there are almost always way behind the beat, and it gives everything a very relaxed sort of it depends on what the music is and what you want to express. So those are the things that I'm talking about here. And your sense of that flexible space between the notes, you're born with a certain rhythmic sense. And what happens is, in the course of becoming a musician, you learn all this technical stuff. You listen to a gazillion other drummers on the radio or wherever you're hearing your music. You're taught by somebody how to do it. Somebody with their own sense of rhythm is teaching you how to play. And you're just exposed to all these other feelings, ideas, experiences, education, all that stuff. Here's you're born here. This is your sense of rhythm and time and space. Now on top of it, you're going to put music teachers, radio, streaming. You don't listen to the radio anymore. Does anybody really for music? No, it's streaming music. The music you hear from other places, ideas, examples, lessons, all that stuff gets piled on top of you. And so the thing you have to do, and what these videos are intended to do, is to help you kind of clear away all that junk that's on top. And what's underneath it all, when we dig down deep enough, we get to you and your sense of rhythm. And that's going to come out. And it's going to be the thing that makes you sound like you and nobody else. So, again, I can't teach you how to, I can teach you how to play ahead and behind the beat, probably, or someone could. Again, I don't do, these videos I'm making are not going to be technical lessons, precisely because of this idea. If I show you how to do something, you're learning my sense of how to do it. And that's not what we want. I don't want you to play like me. You don't want to play like me, trust me. You want to play like you. So I'm not going to be teaching you technical things. That's just not, there's plenty of videos for that. What I'm going to show you here and help you do is, once you've learned all that stuff and you've developed your techniques, I want to help you kind of be able to push that all to one side into your subconscious, so that the part that's actually actively playing is your genuine self, your genuine sense of time. If you listen to drummers that especially drummers that have some swing in their playing, like John Bonham, or any jazz drummer, any good jazz drummer, that sense of swing is coming from this part, the space between the notes that moves around. It changes from note to note, song to song. And you can't pin it down. The best place to hear this, listen to traditional New Orleans funk music, that swampy style of funk that the Meters did. And in fact, I'm usually just listening to the Meters anyway, because Zigaboo is and for my money, it's just one of the best drummers in the world. But listen to his playing, particularly with the whole band. That time is just, it's like Jell-O in a bowl, just moving around. And it's what makes that music just so, you just want to start moving, because that life and flow of the time, the shift of the time, is the thing that makes you can't pin it. It's like watching the ocean, right? In one sense, with the ocean, always looks the same. Here comes some waves, but each wave is different. And we're like watching a fire at a fireplace. The flames are the flames, but they're always changing. They're always slightly different. And it's that difference that hypnotizes us, that compels us, that makes us want to stay there and do that thing. And it's the same with that, the Meters music is just like, it's just so, the rhythm is just so loose, and yet at the same time, you just can't help dancing. And that's the thing. It's like this idea of playing with the space between the notes. It's not, it doesn't make music less danceable. It makes it more danceable when it's coming from your heart and your hips and your backbone. You want to, that's where you want that feel to come from. And then when it's coming from there, out through your hands and your feet, then people will dance, because that's what people dance to. It's the Latin music. A lot of Latin music, there's no downbeat. Nobody's playing the downbeat. The bass isn't playing it. The drums aren't playing it. The percussion mostly isn't playing it. I mean, here and there maybe, but a lot of the time in Latin music, if you listen to it, there's no downbeat. And the reason is because when you don't play that downbeat, the dancers are dancing. They know where the downbeat is. You're not playing it. They expect it. You don't play it. And they fill in that space themselves with their hips. That's what makes that stuff so danceable, so compelling rhythmically. It makes you want to dance, because nobody's playing the note you expect to be there, and you fill it in yourself with your hips. And that's what happens when you play with that space between the notes. It moves organically, and it makes the music more interesting. It makes the music more effective emotionally and rhythmically. And It makes your playing distinctive to you. Nobody sounds like Zigaboo. Nobody. And God knows I try, but I can't do that. Nobody can. It's because he plays entirely from his own organic sense of rhythm. And that's the goal for us here. So that's space and time in terms of drumming. We'll be looking at examples and touching on things as we go through here. But really, this is sort of the essence of the whole idea. Imperfection doesn't mean sloppiness, it doesn't mean randomness, and it doesn't mean a tempo that's all over the place. It simply means it's organic. It's consistent within itself, and it's fully authentic to you. And that is what's going to make you a more musical drummer. So I hope you got something out of that. If you did, please like and subscribe and do all that stuff. It just makes such a difference helping other people find this and decide whether they want it for themselves. And as always, in the comments, please feel free to tell me if something I'm saying doesn't make sense to you, or you just think I'm completely bonkers. Tell me. I'm still learning every day. I've been playing for well over 60 years, and I'm still learning every day. And I learn from other people. You have a perspective I don't have. You have an idea I don't have. Share it down there and share it with all of us, and then we can all talk about it. Because that's the way we grow, that's the way we learn. So for now, thank you very much for being here. I really thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. There's no point in learning all this stuff and getting old if you can't share it with somebody. That's the whole purpose of life in my mind. And sharing it with you is my privilege. So thank you for being here. I'll see you next time.